Hi, my name is Dr. Ulrich, and I teach at Stony Creek High School in Rochester. And I have been asked by the Michigan School Vocal Music Association to share with you some ideas about advanced sight reading and what I've learned, and that's what has worked well for us here at Stony Creek. So with sight reading, there's certainly tons of philosophies and different ways to look at the way you approach teaching sight reading, but I'm just going to share with you what's worked well for us and give you some ideas that maybe you can take into your approach to the way that you learn how to read music and increase your tonal vocabulary. So I've prepared a Google Slides presentation that we're going to work our way through together, and also a lengthy handout that has lots of different examples and things to try. So I will have those, the link to the Google Slides and the link to the handout available for you on the MSVMA website when you click to log into this video, so you can follow along with those things or print them out after you'd like to. So I'm going to share my screen with you and just jump in a little bit to this presentation. So I've entitled this presentation, Moving from the Diatonic to the Chromatic. And the diatonic, I would say, are the set of pitches that we would consider, if you're a movable do person, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. They're the white keys on the piano if you're in C major. And moving to the chromatic, we're going to give you some helpful tips for how to get from just the white keys on C major to all those extra sharps and flats and black keys, altered pitches, or the chromatic pitches in the scale. Our goal is to develop the tonal vocabulary to alter the pitches in the diatonic set. Talking about readiness, if you are, I would consider you ready for this challenge if you're pretty good with your own reading at being able to navigate through the diatonic set. So if you look at a piece of music and there's no accidentals in it, are you able to kind of figure out what you're doing if all of the notes are do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, or do? Okay. And throughout this presentation, I'm going to use the movable do system, which I think most schools in Michigan use. There's some that use fixed do, some that maybe use numbers, but I think that at least your choir teacher will be able to help you through understanding what I'm talking about if you're not familiar with movable do. When I've got examples listed, I will list them in both la and do based minor, because I think both of those are used pretty frequently within the state. Okay, so moving forward, just kind of defining things. The chromatic set of pitches are all of 12 half steps within the octave. So if I play on the piano and play every single key moving up, there's a 12 note set in Western tonal music. In other areas of the world, they use a quarter step system, but for most schools in America, we use this system. And you can see, as it's listed on the screen there, that there are, the way we alter the syllables is when we raise them, we use an E sound. So do, di, re, mi, fa, fi, so, si, la, li, ti, do. Then when they go down, they use an A version. Do, ti, te, la, le, so, se, fa, mi, me, re, ra, do. And ra is the exception because it was already an A syllable, so now it becomes ra. So we're going to talk today about how to get it so that you could hear those altered pitches in a more effective way. The first thing I would suggest is that there are, if you practice different kinds of scales beyond major and minor, you'll be able to experience this in an easier way. So what you'll be doing is sort of training your ears to know where you're going with the different scale sounds because you've just experienced them away from music. So I've listed on the handout, and once again, there's a link within this document, but there also will be a link on the MSVM website right to the handout. Let me share my handout with you real quick. I'm going to escape out of this and share this with you. So let's just talk about the different kinds of scales we've got. If I go to the beginning of the handout, we've got a typical major scale, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, ti, la, so, fa, mi, re, do. Notice I've listed on the sheet where the half steps happen. And I think it's important for you to be thinking about how half steps function away from whole steps, because most chromatic alterations in music, when we start using those altered pitches, they really talk a lot, they really deal with half step motion and the way half steps are sort of charged. So the natural minor scale is, if we take a major scale and just start 2 notes lower, it's going to put us in natural minor. But just listen to the sound of this natural minor. Now in harmonic minor, what we do is we take the 7th note of the scale and we raise it a half step so that there's a strong relationship from the leading tone of the scale, the 7th note of the scale, to the top note. Listen to how this sounds in harmonic minor. So we have a strong relationship from T to Do. The problem is, when we have that harmonic minor scale, I've marked it on this sheet that we've got an augmented second, an extra large interval between Fa and C, or between Lay and Ti. So listen to how this sounds sort of almost snake charmer-ish to some ears. That little section of the scale is a little awkward. So what, a long time ago in the 16th century, 15th century, they devised a system where on the way up, we would raise both the 6th and the 7th notes, and on the way down, we would return them back to minor, or back to their normal, like naturally occurring pitches. So the melodic minor scale sounds like this. A lot of people are familiar with the 3 different forms of minor and then major, but I would suggest that in choir, if you start warming up and just singing through these other scales, that you will really, really help your ear learn to develop a vocabulary of what's going on outside of the typical set. So a chromatic scale, we've already talked about a little bit, it's one that uses all half steps. So do, di, re, mi, fa, fi, so, si, la, li, ti, do. And then going down, we change the syllables on the way down. I would suggest this as part of your daily warm-up. Just sing a chromatic scale every time you warm up with your choir, and you'll be able to do it pretty quickly in a couple weeks or so, and it'll just be in your ears, in your set, the set of things that you're familiar with, if you will. A whole tone scale is a scale that's a little bit funky sounding. It's all whole steps, so hence the name whole tone scale. What's interesting about the whole tone scale, it sounds a little bit like sort of the dream sequence in Scooby-Doo or something. So listen, if I just play a whole tone scale kind of fast, it sounds like this. It's kind of a unique sound. It's sort of tonally ambiguous because there's no half steps to help us feel where home base is. But if you can sing a whole tone scale as a choir, you really, really have a good grasp on how to be comfortable with alterations of pitches. So I would once again suggest that every day in your warm-up routine, just sing a whole tone scale or two, and you'll get good at it after a couple weeks. My students really can do this quite well, just because we do it every day and their ears are used to learning and hearing it. Notice on the way up, the altered notes are E versions, and on the way down, they are A versions. So do, re, mi, fi, si, li, do, te, le, se, mi, re, do. It's a very awkward scale. It took me a long time to be able to, a couple weeks to really be able to just sing that on my own. But over time, you'll be able to do it. So that's what I would first suggest, is sort of as a preparation for learning how to do altered pitches in sight reading, that you learn how to sing these scales first. Okay, let's move on. Just a couple little things to kind of just kind of get all of our vocabulary in the same place. If we talk about accidentals, a flat lowers a note, any note, a half step. A sharp raises a note a half step, and a natural can do either of those two things. It can cancel out the effects of a sharp or a flat. So it can raise a note that was flatted and now is natural, or it can lower a note that was flat, that was sharp and now is natural. So it also can move a note a whole step. So let's say you had the note B double flat, and then the next note was B natural. Well, that's actually moving it moving it a whole step. So a natural basically just returns the note to status quo, back to its original location. Okay. So when you've got accidentals, when we talk about accidentals, they're really just alterations. So if you're looking through a piece of music and let's say it's in the key of G flat, Well, you're going to have 6 flats listed at the beginning of the, or 7 flats listed at the beginning of the, no, 6 at the beginning of the piece. And then all of those notes then will just be listed without sharps or flats on them. Well, then they're part of the normal diatonic set. So diatonic is sort of the notes that fit in do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. The alterations or the accidentals are any note that has a sharp or a flat or a natural on it to change it. Okay, so within the major scale, we talked about this, that the half steps give a little bit of a charge, a sound of charge. So the motion of these half steps are what create the sense of tonal center toward do. We call them leading tones. So you heard me mention the word leading tone a little bit earlier. Ti moving to do kind of gives us that sense of charge. So if we're in a specific key, let's say we're in this key. Feel a good strong sense of from do, ti, do. That motion from ti is what makes us feel a sense of belonging, that do is home base. I've got here listed on the screen what we call a 5/7 chord. And in this one, you've got motion from fa to mi and from ti to do. Fa to mi is the other location of the half steps in the scale. So listen to how this even sounds stronger. Here's just the normal 5 chord. Here's a 5/7 chord, and I'll play it as it's written on the page. That has even more gravitational pull toward back to do because fa wants to move to mi and ti wants to move to do. 5/7 chords are really, really important in music, and they're really, really common as well. But what you'll notice is when we have alterations, they're most often moving us into a location for a different do. So altered pitches can create new leading tones and set up zones within the music where a different tonal center is present. And we call that tonicization. So if you look here at this little passage I've written here, I've started out in a normal do chord. So I'll play the chord as it's written. It's played like this. Now listen to what happens with the quarter after it. Because of that F sharp that's there, it wants us to move us to a different location. It changes the half step relationship. So let me just play the passage that's there. Now it feels like the chord we just ended on is do because of that F sharp. The altered pitch in the middle, fi, for example, creates a new leading tone towards so. It changes the half step relationship. Sometimes we call chords like that, where an alteration occurs, a secondary dominant chord because it creates a dominant motion or a 5-to-1 motion in a secondary location. Okay, this might seem a little bit advanced, but if you learn to hear these things easily, you'll learn to recognize them really quickly in pieces. And hopefully your teacher can kind of clarify a little bit more of what I'm talking about if that gets confusing. So I've sort of developed a system of ear training that I think will help you in terms of the difficulty level of these pitches. I would introduce these different notes in this order. Fa, fi, so is probably the most common one. And as you look down the list, you can see that they're sort of listed in a good sequence. Inside of the handout that I've given you, I've got warm-ups that include those alterations. So take a look at those warm-ups and maybe just start to incorporate those as you're learning to do altered pitches. Use those warm-ups and move them in different locations, or maybe make your own up. I would develop comfort with each of those patterns before you add on the next one. So it's kind of like when you're learning new words, and if you're in Spanish class or in French or German or Italian class, you learn new words, you become comfortable with those words, and you can add new ones on. I would wait and kind of do them in this order, in this sequential motion. Also included in the handout are some sight reading exercises to introduce each alteration pattern. So let's go to the handout for 1 second. Let me escape out of this one and move over here. And I'll play through some of those warm-ups as well, just so you can kind of get a sense of what they're like. Okay, so we've got some scales listed, and then here's some different warm-ups. So let me just play through a couple of them and just give you a flavor of them. Do, re, mi, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, la, ti, do, so, do. And you can move that up to a different key. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, La, si, la, ti, do, so, do. So use those little altered warm-ups, which I've listed, I think 10 of them, as different ways to train your ear while you're vocalizing in class and working on vocal technique things, okay? I think a lot of them would be helpful for that. And I've sort of set them up with different, some of them are sort of fun, some of them are sort of jazzy. Like this one, number 7 is do, me, fa, fi, so, te, do, te, fi, so, fa, me, do. Then you do it in a different key. Move up a half step and do it again, kind of thing. So some of them are kind of fun. And then like number 10's got some finger snapping. This is like do, re, mi, re, do, re, me, re, do, re, mi, fi, so, le, so, me, do. Okay, so they're kind of just different things to kind of get your ear trained to deal with those altered pitches in a meaningful way. Okay, then here's some sight reading examples. So like here's a fa, fi, so sight reading. If you take a look at this, you've got altered note, and that alteration from the first measure is because I didn't edit that properly from the previous one, but it's just normal E natural. So we're in the key of C major, no sharps or flats. And if you look at measure 3, we've got an F to an F sharp to a G. So a fa, fi, so, okay? So, and I've listed different sight reading examples here as kind of examples of ones that I might write for my students, where I just have one altered pitch in there, and we're kind of working in a localized way on dealing with that specific alteration, okay? So there's several different sight reading examples there listed for you in different keys and different time signatures, sort of around the same difficulty level though on all of those. Okay, so take a look at that handout. I think it would really be really helpful for you. Let's move back to the Google Slides. So we talked about unison sight reading examples. And like I said, it's easiest if you first learn these alterations and warm-ups away from written notation. So use those warm-ups as a good ear training sort of starter, or even before that, the scales first, then the warm-ups, then add in the sight reading. So they're sort of adding visual representation for students to what they already know with their ear and with their mind. Okay. So now after that on the handout, there's several Bach chorales that I kind of went through and I analyzed these chorales and sort of to show you in what way, when we sight read in MSVMA for advanced level, we use Bach chorales as the basis for those sight readings when those are composed. So in what way does Bach use altered pitches to kind of relocate our do in different places? How does he tonicize us in different areas? So we talk about using the harmonic context around you to help with tuning. So when you're sight reading an individual line, it's sometimes hard to feel where the chord structure is going. But if you've got S, A, T, B parts present all at the same time, a lot of times if the tenors have a weird leap or some sort of weird alteration, they'll get most of that harmonic information from the other 3 parts around them. And that really helps. So if you learn to listen vertically and use the harmonic clues around you, when you read a Bach chorale, that's really the way to be successful. And I wrote some ways that you might want to practice this. So if you have a Bach chorale, maybe you find some online that are different than the ones I've listed here, just find them. They're all available free online. Have the entire choir sing the alto part and just practice that line. So they're all together. There's a lot of people together on one part, learning the alterations there, and maybe have somebody, the accompanist or your director, play the other parts while you're all working in the alto part. Then everybody sing the tenor part, etc. Go through all the different voice parts. Then maybe put them back all together and see if you can do it SATB style or SSAA or TTBB or whatever the voicing of your choir. I listed 2 different definitions here from online that I found for the word tonicization. Oxford Music Online defines it as the act of establishing a new key center or of giving a degree other than the first do the role of the tonic. We call tonic and home base kind of the same thing. Tonic is like where do is. The chord you feel like when it feels like the song can end is the tonic. And then Wikipedia, which is not always the most reliable source, but I think I like their definition. It says the treatment of a pitch other than the overall tonic as a temporary tonic in a composition. So it's when we've got a motion toward a different do temporarily, and then we might move to another location before we come back to the original do. So let me just show you real quick on some of these Bach chorales that I've got in the handout. and ways that I sort of analyze them. So in this one, from Ein Lämmelein geht und trägt die Schuld, there's SATB style written here. And then notice the first example the first altered pitch that happens is an F natural in the third complete measure. And what that F natural does is it destabilizes us away from G major, the tonality. And then we've got a C sharp in the next measure that tonicizes. It moves us to feel on that fermata that we're going to arrive at a D major. So the D major is temporarily do. Then right after that, a C natural comes back in to bring us back to the feeling of G major as do again. So you can kind of look through these chorales and maybe as you sing them, work on them a little bit in class, sight read through them, and then discuss the little words, the little phrases I've got written between each of these lines that kind of give you a sense of, oh, okay, now I understand why does Bach write this note altered here? Well, it's because he wants to temporarily lead us to a different sense of do. So pieces like this are will change tonalities often throughout the piece. You'll see how many in this first one, how many different places do we have that we're moving things around, 5 or 6 places that the tonality center has shifted and then comes back to do at the very end. So that's just a little bit of sort of theoretical theoretical basis behind, I'm sorry for there's an announcement here at school, theoretical basis behind the way that composers look at arranging music, and for you to understand as a singer how to approach alterations in pieces. Okay, let's go back to the thing. Sorry, this is just like normal. There's always technological issues and announcements going on during the school day, so sorry about that. All right, let's move ahead. I think that might be my last slide actually. So let me put it back on my face so you can see me a little bit. Hopefully this gives you an understanding of kind of when you're looking at a Bach chorale or you're looking at a piece with altered pitches, the way you should approach it. There's sort of a, if you will scaffold the learning by first doing some scale work that trains ears, then some warm-ups that continues to train ears, then sight reading examples that isolate the different alterations, then put them in context in real music like a Bach chorale where you're experiencing maybe several of them inside of a harmonic context around you. Hopefully my discussion has given you a little bit of insight into those things and a way to start the learning process to move you past the point of diatonic and into the chromatic. If you need to get a hold of me, my email is included in the presentation, and I think that many of your teachers may know me, and maybe some of the students that are watching this have had me judge your choirs before, and I look forward to maybe saying hi to some of you in the future. Hopefully this was worthwhile and a good use of your time. Thank you so much for joining me today.